Secondly, we can look at exchange systems, how people produce and distribute goods, services, status, and capital. Every society and every organization in the society must have some way of producing and distributing the goods and services which sustain the lives of its members. Think through if your organization has discipleship materials. How do you use those? How do you get those across? How do you train people in using those? This is all part of the exchange system. And so the set of institutions and roles which are organized around the performance of these activities constitutes the economic system of the organization. What are the economics of discipleship? Exchange of information. Typically, you're not taking up a monetary collection in a small group discipleship setting, at least in North America. But in church settings, part of the discipleship of the church itself that takes place is tithes and offerings that are to be brought in. Several types of capital used in exchange systems. Monetary capital, physical capital seen in barter. So I'll give you a... When we were in Kenya, we had something called Harambee, which in Swahili means let's pull together. And it was a means of fundraising in the church. When I first came to Kenya in 1984, I attended a Presbyterian church which was in process of being built. At the time, we were still in a mabati, in a tin-roofed, corrugated iron-roofed structure, but we were on a plot of ground which had a very nice foundation laid for another structure that was being built. And each year I was there, they would have a Harambee. They would pull together and people would contribute funds. Think of it as a building fund. Can you imagine a church in the U.S. starting to build something and then leaving it 1/7 finished? And then the next year adding walls, and then the next year adding a roof, and then the next year adding light fixtures and a floor. Well, this is what I saw take place, and every year we would have these social gatherings, and it was a joyous and festive time, but a number of people didn't have cash, so they would be bananas. They might bring a goat. They might bring cloth that they had. And then these items would be auctioned off, and the people of greater economic status always came with extra money to purchase things at the auction, and then that money would go towards the building project. Again, that was a type of economic barter for them. Their tithe was not in cash, but their tithe was gifts in kind. Social status, social obligations, social connections, and spiritual capital. I'll pray for you. We don't think of it that way, but especially if people think your prayers are effective because of your status with the Lord, whether they're right in thinking that way or not, that's a form of spiritual exchange that can take place on behalf of people. So as we look now at exchanges, I'm going to go to Philemon 1:18. Read the book of Philemon from this exchange principle. Look at the economics. Charge it to me, Paul says. I will pay it back. Prepare a guest room for me. Social capital. I appeal to you on the basis of love. He has become useful to you and me. Your favor will be spontaneous. If you consider me a partner, I know you will do more than I ask. Spiritual exchange. He's my very heart. I'm in chains for the gospel. It's hard to get stronger than that type of an appeal. You can have him back for good as a brother in Christ is the implication, not as a slave. You owe me your very self. Because Paul had led Philemon to Christ. I may have benefit from you in the Lord. I hope to be restored in answer to your prayers. And then linking capital, connecting people to each other who might not otherwise be connected. Onesimus could take your place in helping me out. He is dear to me, but even more dear to you. But I want you to see I have a connection with him. He's a runaway slave. You have the right to kill him. That's what Roman law said. But Paul is using every trick he can to save the life of this dear brother in Christ. And to get Philemon, who is also a follower, to act in the right way. Some of us are thinking to ourselves, wait a second, wouldn't Philemon normally not kill him? Well, the reality is, he grew up in a society where runaway slaves were a threat to the very economic foundation of the society. And so there is a punishment that comes as a result of that. Just as we might consider someone needing jail time to wake them up, he might have considered death as a message that needed to be sent to his other slaves. We don't know how many he had. Whatever we think of slavery, the reality is this is a system that Philemon and Onesimus live in. And Paul, in one sense, is undermining slavery by how he's writing this. But he's not speaking out directly, no more slaves. But what he is doing is laying a foundation by which slavery will eventually be undermined. Back to the same case study, looking at different sets of verses now in relationship to exchange. So if I look at freedom, I see Galatians 1 on the U.S. side. It is for freedom that Christ set us free. Stand firm then, and do not let yourselves be burdened again by a yoke of slavery. As opposed to the Koreans, I'll look at Hebrews 5:8 under obedience. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from what he suffered. I'd be interested in a Korean theology of suffering and how they might look at that in relation to authority, harmony, face or honor, and role and place. I suspect it would be different than my theology of suffering, which might look more at the physical element and my connection with Christ without necessarily taking the larger social element, without thinking through honor and face and respect and harmony as part of it. The third social component is that of learning systems and how people educate and how you learn. Discipleship is ultimately a learning activity. As I mentioned in another lecture, I was discipled through the Navigators in their Design for Discipleship series. And the framework of this is you've got statements, you've got biblical passages, you look them up, and you either fill in the blank or you answer questions with a sentence or two. The framework for discipleship there was largely cognitive. At least in my year of discipleship with Navigators, I never met one-on-one with people, which is how Navigators is thought of. We never went out and did anything together. At least in this case, either the model broke down or this is what happens on U.S. campuses. My model of discipleship was all cognitive. And we would come with the answers and we would talk through the questions and we would argue with them and wrestle with them and try and understand them. But there typically was seen to be one right answer to every question. Our goal was to find out what the right answer was. Being in an educational system at the time, it was a natural goal for us. And it's natural for us to think of discipleship as a cognitive framework rather than in a holistic way. We transmit these to new members in order to prepare them to live and function within the society in a socially acceptable manner. Every society has a learning system, a multiple learning system. Sometimes it's older brother teaching younger brother. Sometimes it's formal education. Sometimes it's apprenticeship. Sometimes it's one generation which has a particular responsibility for either the next generation or in some cases it even skips a generation and they're responsible for the second generation coming up after them to raise them.